As they've asked me to select a topic, and I want to talk about a topic that has been in one of my big interests from way, way back to the beginning of my career. In a minute I'll show you one paper I first published in 1985 when I was much younger, working in London in the Lancet, and it caused me to nearly get lynched, run out of England, and I've been doing the same thing ever since. So I'm going to update you on this topic of unassisted smoking cessation, which is in fact how most people who used to smoke and now do not have stopped. But first, you all know that nicotine is a very problematic drug. Just today on the internet, I found this: who is the best player in the world? Ronaldo or Messi? And it's an unknown neurological effect of nicotine to get the very bad judgment to say that Ronaldo is better than Messi. So another problem. Okay. So, as I was saying, this paper here I published in the Lancet in 1985. It's called "Stop Smoking Clinics, a Case for Their Abandonment." And I wrote this to be deliberately provocative because I could not see that the mathematics of people going to intensive clinic situations was ever going to make a difference to population-wide smoking prevalence. And that was what that paper was about. I then did this one in 2012 in The Lancet, the inverse impact law of smoking cessation. I'll explain this in a minute. And this one here, which has had 43,000 downloads in PLOS Medicine, the global research neglect of unassisted smoking cessation. What are the causes of this neglect, and what are the consequences of us not thinking and researching about how most people quit smoking and not? And a lot of people want to burn my books like this, burn my papers, because it's what we call, like in the Inquisition in Spain, a heretic, Okay, so I've also been doing more recent work, and it's not time to look at these now, but these are very recent papers exploring the same topic, research papers, not just think pieces, not just discussion pieces like the other ones. Okay, so the inverse impact law of smoking cessation. In my Lancet paper, I said that the volume of research and effort devoted to professional and pharmacologically mediated cessation is exactly around the opposite way to that examining how most smokers actually quit. Research on cessation is dominated by ever finely tuned accounts of how smokers can be encouraged to do anything except quit alone. We see a smoker, we want to give them professional help, or we want to give them medication. We don't want to say, hey, just to try to quit, you'll probably be okay. So this is exactly the opposite of how a very large majority of ex-smokers have actually succeeded. Now, I said, I play in a band. I asked my musicians, which of you have had professional tuition to play the guitar or the drums or the keyboards? Okay, that's in a band. My wife up the back is the keyboard player. She had 8 years of professional training in the keyboard. She could play Chapman and Rachmaninoff, Mozart, no problem, you know, with blindfold. Okay? But all the other musicians, they just learn the guitar. I am a very, very good cook, and I've never had professional lessons in cooking. There are many things that we can do in life and in, with our personal health behaviours that do not actually require the mediation of drugs or professional in order for them to happen. And in fact, there is a literature in the scientific literature about what we call self-change research. And this is a man from Zurich, Klingemann, who I hosted in Australia a few years ago. Very interesting work he's done. I would recommend that you look at some of his work. What we know from many studies of dependencies, that most people who stop these dependencies, they do so unaided. It is true for problem drinking, for narcotics use, gambling, eating disorders. It's not a dependency, but you understand my point. Smoking. And before we had any formal interventions for smoking, before nicotine replacement therapy, before bupropion, before varenicline, 1986, American Cancer Society said over 90% of estimated 37 million people who had stopped have done so unaided. So that's just for one country, the United States, which has, I think, about 7% of the world's population. So around the world, there would be hundreds of millions of people who used to smoke and no longer smoke. I'm one. I used to be a very bad boy in school, smoking lots of cannabis, lots of everything, bad, everything fun, and now I'm very boring. I'm only the gusto vino tinto. So in the professional community, put out messages like this. This is from, I believe, a Pfizer-sponsored program in the United Kingdom. Don't go cold turkey, saying to people, you must not think, if you are a smoker, you must not think about stopping by yourself. This is another poster. You can't read the small print here, but it says there are some people who can go cold turkey and stop, but there are not many of them. Well, this is absolutely wrong. There are many, many, many people who have stopped smoking without professional help or medication. And this is a good illustration. This is a very large study from the United States. Saul Schiffman, you will recognize him, leading advocate researcher for assisted cessation. Joe Gitchell, another man, now very involved in e-cigarettes. And 29,500 adult smokers, unassisted, 7,700, and a quit rate percentage of 20.6% versus pharmacological. And you can see there that there were 2.3 times more quit unaided in the population. This is a cross-sectional study. Okay, limitations of cross-sectional studies, but it's just an illustration. There are many, many studies like this. This is meta-analysis of 12 nicotine replacement therapy randomized controlled trials with follow-up of more than 12 months. And you can see active NRT and placebo participants. And in conclusion, this is Etta and Stapleton, two leading researchers in assisted cessation. And they make the point here that the true overall impact of nicotine replacement therapy is modest, represents success for only about 7%. So let's turn that upside down, and we see that about 93% of people who are using nicotine replacement therapy in randomized trials are not succeeding. So, let's keep on looking at some of the evidence here. Cochrane, over 130 studies, and it suggests that nicotine replacement therapy in trials, 50 to 70% greater. But what we need to understand about randomized controlled trials is that they overestimate real-world effects. And it's very important for us to understand that when we are reading trial data, you have to then start asking, well, what happens in the real world? Some of the reasons why it overestimates effects. Okay, trialists get drugs free, so you're not paying for it. Okay? In the real world, you go into the pharmacy and say, give me the free drugs. I'm sorry. Okay. Hawthorne effects, caused by research attention paid to them. Now, this is from a paper that I saw an average of 7.6 contacts between the researchers and the subjects. And researchers are trained in cohort retention. You know, they have special training sessions. How can we stop people leaving the cohort? I would be very nice to them, you know, ask about their children, you know, maybe give them little rewards and chocolates or, you know, stuff like that. Be a nice person as a researcher and your cohort will be retained more. So this produces a desire to please the researcher. Oh, it's that lovely person from the university who is speaking to me on the phone now. I don't really want to speak to her, but yes, I will, because she's so nice. Okay? So it's an artificial situation that doesn't happen in the real world. So this probably collectively exaggerates real-world effects. Doesn't change the difference between placebo and active, but probably exaggerates the size of the effect. In this paper, published in Tobacco Control, 66% of participants with nicotine dependence were excluded from randomized controlled trials by at least one criterion, and especially if they had mental health problems. Other exclusion criteria are language problems. These days, increasingly, if people have cell phones but not landline telephones, it's difficult to contact them, to, you know, all of those factors. So we know, particularly with the mental health, that there is large over-representation in smokers with mental health problems. So you take these people out of the trial, the effects are probably not going to be like in the real world. Nicotine replacement trials have very poor, what we call blindness integrity. People who are placed on the placebo know that they are on the placebo. It's not like you are on antihypertension drug or a placebo. I'm on antihypertension drug, and I take it each morning. I don't suddenly feel different. You know, it has no effect on my awareness of my body. But if you are a nicotine addict and you are given a placebo patch, you are probably going to be accurate in guessing that you are on the placebo arm, not on the active arm. And in fact, this is what this found. 12 out of 17 studies tested for blindness integrity found subjects accurately judged treatment assigned at rates significantly above chance. So again, this is if you don't believe that you are on the active drug, if you know you are on the placebo, it's not going to really do much for your confidence that you are on a drug which might help you. This is Annual Review of Public Health from John Pierce from San Diego. These results have encouraged governments to recommend strongly that pharmaceutical aids be used in all quit attempts. To date, there is no such evidence that such policies lead to an increase in cessation in the population. If we give nicotine replacement therapy to people indiscriminately, there is not much evidence that it increases quit rates in the population. Here are some real-world data. This is percent success. I've got my glasses on. 3+ months quit at follow-up. You can see here unassisted, 26%, use quitline clinic or other help, 17%, use NRT or prescription, 19%. And similarly here, this is for lighter smokers, less than 15 cigarettes per day, over 15 cigarettes per day. Figures, again, are favouring unassisted. This is a paper that just came out last week in Tobacco Control about varenicline. And they were looking at what happened when varenicline started to be used a lot in the community. And basically, the conclusion was addition of varenicline to the list of approved cessation aids has mainly led to displacement of other therapies. So people who are using bupropion or nicotine replacement therapy have now jumped over to varenicline, but there's not much evidence that it's showing effect in the population. Just lots of more quit attempts. Okay. So this one here, someone you'll be familiar with, Robert West, a prospective cohort of effectiveness of treatments used in the real world. Conclusion: prescription medication offered with specialist behavioural support. So in other words, not just the drug, but with specialist support, is worth using. Very carefully worded. If you read the paper, it says that prescription medication without specialist support is not much evidence that it makes much difference. Okay. So why are we getting these sorts of results for products which should be showing, on the randomised trials that active drug is better than placebo? Well, probably what we call indication bias. And this means that confounding by indication, confounding by severity of disease, results from the conscious choice of different treatments for patients with different prognosis. If I am a very, very addicted smoker, and I'm probably going to lean towards trying drugs because I think I can't do it by myself. So those people probably have worse chances of quitting than people who don't just define themselves as being heavily dependent or believing that they cannot quit. So this may be what's responsible here. This is just more data of the same. I'll skip over that one. In Australia, we have good longitudinal data. This paper here in 2008, and there's been another one by the same group since, showed that neither nicotine replacement therapy or bupropion sales nor advertising expenditure had any detectable impact on smoking prevalence across 12 years. So a lot of money being spent on government subsidising these drugs, a lot of people using it, a lot of advertising on television for it, a lot of sales, but no detectable difference attributable to the drugs from this. So when one of these papers came out that was saying the same thing, this group, Association for Treatment of Tobacco Use and Dependence, made this statement: nicotine replacement therapy is currently marketed for short-term use as an aid to smoking cessation. Over 100 trials have found it increases short-term abstinence, and in these studies, after it is stopped, the rate of relapse back to smoking does not differ from that of smokers who quit without treatment. This is the interesting bit. The benefit of treatment is of increasing initial quit rates, not preventing relapse. So this is interesting for me because it's almost saying, look, we don't think it will get you to quit smoking for good. It gets you to quit smoking for a little bit, but you will probably relapse just the same as unassisted smoking cessation person. Their solution? They are not using it for long enough to stave off relapse, suggesting we need to educate nicotine replacement therapy users better and convince the Food and Drug Administration that 12 weeks is not long enough to be maximally effective. You can see the pharmaceutical industry being very happy at this sort of statement being made because they're going to sell more. So what's the evidence for using it for longer? Well, if we go to Cochrane reviews nicotine replacement therapy for smoking cessation. Most of the studies were performed on people smoking more than 15 cigarettes a day, and no benefit for using patches beyond 8 weeks. So they're saying use it for more than 8 weeks, but Cochrane says actually there's not much evidence that even using it beyond 8 weeks. Okay, I said a while ago that West study showed that if you have support plus the therapy, this is worth using. The problem is if you are a population health worker, that you have to ask yourself how many people are interested to use assistance. Okay, so we have quit lines in Australia. It's operating 24 hours a day. On every cigarette packet is the phone number of the quit line. On every anti-smoking advertisement on television is the quit line number on the bottom. But only 3.6% of smokers ever call the quit line. I'm not talking about them coming in, sitting down, having a cup of tea, having a therapy session with you, having a evidence-based mediation, laying on of hands, nothing like that. I'm talking about just picking up the telephone. Only 3.6% will do that. In the USA, it is worse, 1.4. In the UK, in the area with the highest participation of clinics, only 6% attended in a paper I saw. That's a little bit old, it may have improved since then. But it is a small minority of smokers who want to come along to the clinic and speak to people. So my conclusion about this is that prospects for higher engagement with support, I don't think that they are very strong. We have been talking about this now for 30 years. Oh, we need to get more people to come along and get support. But I'm not seeing much evidence around the world that there is anywhere. UK perhaps, Japan is another country where there is a big network of smoking cessation centres. But I've never seen good data from Japan to suggest if it's a significant population impact. Okay, compliance is also very poor. These are studies from New England Journal of Medicine about nicotine replacement therapy in pregnancy, when we know there is strong motivation for many women to quit. So what we found in this study was what the authors reported, 7.2% and 2.2% of the placebo used for more than 1 month. The rest just wouldn't use it anymore in this large study in New England Journal. So is this information I have been giving you is regarded by many people in the field as being heretic information. They understand that word? Heretic? Heretic, yeah. Heretic. You know, like, I can be in trouble. So, it is rarely emphasised in information to smokers. There are very few campaigns ever mention that most people who quit smoking quit unaided. Cursory attention in reviews. Most reviews about smoking cessation are about assisted cessation. They might have one paragraph which acknowledges that most people quit unaided, but the rest of it is about assisted. It is framed as a challenge to be forcefully eroded. This is John Britton. This is John Britton from England. If there is a major failing in the UK approach, it is not that it has medicalised smoking, but that it has not done so enough, he says. And this one, unfortunately, most smokers fail to use evidence-based treatments to support their quit attempts. Well, evidence-based is only evidence about assistance. It's not evidence about what happens in the real world, according to people who talk like that. So I just reviewed this paper for a journal. I can't tell you what it was, obviously, but it was a military sample. They asked a very rare question of people who had quit smoking. How hard was it, how difficult was it to quit? And you'll notice that 7.1% of people said it was either much harder or harder than expected. People who said, oh, it was just about as difficult or as easy as I expected, 42%, but 50% said it was much easier than expected, easier or much easier than expected. 20%, you know, 1 in 5 people who quit smoking said, hey, what was all that about? You know, it was much easier to quit than I expected. I think one of the consequences of over-pathologizing cessation is that when citizens have common, ordinary, self-limiting ailments and traits and behaviours described as something that they cannot do for themselves, they cannot make change for themselves, it erodes human agency and self-efficacy as the populations lose confidence in their ability to recover. My wife read me out something this morning from Facebook, which was really amusing. It was a list of about 50 things that when we grew up, we did, and now we don't do that. So, for example, my mother, if I had a dirty face, would get her handkerchief, spit on the handkerchief, and wipe off, you know. Now, that, you know, get the special product. You know, it's very funny. I'll send it to you and you can distribute. It's a very interesting list of loss of agency in the community. Some people, this is just a photograph I took in Cambodia, in a pharmacy shop in Cambodia. The prices, you can't really read them from there, but $36, $20, $58. So this is the average monthly wage in Cambodia is about $60. So you can see that this stuff is completely irrelevant to people living in poorest of countries. In Indonesia, 3 months of nicotine replacement therapy costs as much as 7 years' supply of cigarettes. So it's just not going to happen. So finishing up, what should we tell smokers? I'm not trying to say that we should just let smokers just quit. I'm saying that we can be very active in trying to encourage smokers to take quit attempts. Because the literature, as I understand it, shows that the more you try, the more likely it is that you'll eventually succeed. So I think that we should tell smokers that unassisted cessation is the most common way that smokers have succeeded. It is a very positive message. and should be openly embraced as a frontline message. It's the first thing that we should say as clinicians to our patients. You know, a lot of people have quit smoking. And did you know the most common way that most people quit smoking is that they just decide they don't want to quit, and they make some efforts to quit, and they succeed. It's nothing wrong in saying that. You know, we should emphasise it. Along with motivational why messages designed to stimulate cessation, smokers should be repeatedly told that cold turkey is the method most commonly used. More smokers find it unexpectedly easy or moderately difficult than find it difficult to quit. Failures are a normal part of the natural history of cessation. If you like, they are rehearsals for eventual success. We had a very famous sportsman in Australia. We played a game called cricket, you may have heard of, and he was the world's champion bowler. He's the most famous bowler in the history of cricket, a man called Shane Warne. Now, he took $200,000 from a pharmaceutical company to say that he was quitting smoking using nicotine replacement therapy. And predictably, from what I'm saying, several months later, he was photographed smoking again. And so all the headlines said, look, you know, he's smoking again. So the journalists rang me up and they said, what is your comment about this? And so I said, well, he is a world champion sportsman, but he is a very ordinary smoker. This is what happens when you try to quit smoking. You know, most people, they don't succeed the first time, maybe not even the second or the third or the fourth, but eventually, many, not all, do succeed. Assistance, and I emphasise against assistance. I do believe that in economies, in cultures like we have here, that we do need second-line support for people who find it very, very difficult. After all, we have support for all sorts of other things that people are finding difficult to do. I just think that we need to get some perspective on it. And I'm not against pharmaceutical research. I think that pharmaceutical research may one day produce breakthroughs. E-cigarettes may be one of those breakthroughs. You know that I'm a skeptic at the moment about e-cigarettes, but and I'm not impressed with some of the best studies that's showing the results from people at 12 months, what's happening compared to people who are trying to quit using other methods. But it may get better, and we should all be open to that, provided that the balancing is not a lot of uptake of these products. So, well, that was the final slide that I won't bother showing. So let's now open it up for your questions.